Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. The title of today's book is Getting to 50/50. Now that's nice and short and succinct, but then we go to two subtitles. Subtitle number 1, Getting to 50/50, How Working Couples Can Have It All by Sharing It All. And then there's Getting to 50/50 and Why It's Great for Your Marriage, Your Career, your kids, and you. Now, unfortunately, we only have one of the two authors, and her name is Sharon Meers, and I welcome you.
Jim, thanks very much for having me here.
When Bantam Books did the publishing.
They did a fine job.
They did the publishing. Now, I'm wondering about these two subtitles. Was this a fight between the co-authors and they couldn't settle? It was declared a draw and each got one?
No. In fact, Joanna and I spent many months talking to our wonderful editor at Bantam, trying to figure out how to convey what we wanted to on the cover. What this book was really about was talking about the possibility of husbands and wives, moms and dads sharing more equally so we can both be close with our kids and have the careers we want. But that's so outside the frame of a lot of what gets talked about that we wanted to be very clear on the cover that it was a positive book and that it looked at all parts of the equation.
And that's a very good idea because the subtitles are very, very accurate for what's in the book. So that was a very, very good decision. The other thing that impresses me immediately about the book is the amount of research behind it. It says here, after interviewing hundreds of parents and employers, surveying more than 1,000 working mothers, and combing through the latest government and social science research, oh, do you? The authors have discovered that kids, husbands, and so on can all go together. How long did it take you to do that?
It's been a total of 4 years. When
Wow.
I left my standard day job, I told my husband it was going to be 18 months. Foolish me.
18 months, you told.
Foolish me. I had no idea what I was talking about. And, we knew we both wanted to get out and talk to real people, husbands and wives in lots of different kinds of jobs all over the country, all different ages from their 80s to their 20s. And we just had no idea how long that was going to take. And then we actually got into the research and said, oh my goodness, there's all this great stuff. And it was sort of like, pulling on the end of a string and more kept coming. And we got to go talk to some of the most interesting, psychologists, economists, et cetera, in the country. And what they had to say was really, really helpful.
Did you have enough in the contract to support the research, or were you investing your own?
We were very lucky to get a terrific advance, but it was also a labor of love.
Good. The other thing about this book is that the two authors are living the book. It says here, Sharon Meers was a managing director of Goldman Sachs and Company until April 2005, when she decided to do this book, this little 18-month leave she was going to take. And she decided it was time to write this book. In her 16-year career at Goldman, Sharon ran several businesses and served in the diversity committees of two of the firm's divisions, et cetera, and had two children, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And a husband who changed jobs, decided that working for somebody was not giving him the freedom that he needed to become a 50/50 parent. So he founded his own real estate firm.
That's correct.
I got that right. Joanna Strober has spent her career working as an attorney and as an investor in venture capital and private equity. She is currently managing director of a fund investing in private equity partnerships at Sterling Stamos Capital Management. She didn't take a leave?
No, so we realized that we've been talking about this from about 2003 forward because we just thought there was a lot of wonderful information, things that could inspire both our peers and younger men and women. And we had thought about writing the book for a little bit and realized that we weren't going to get it done on evenings and weekends, both working full time.
Yeah.
And so when it became clear to me that I needed to make a job change, it all got easier. And there were some hands to do some writing, and
that's great.
we could get going.
That's great. Now, you say early on, I guess this is the introduction, this is not another polemic on stay-at-home mothers versus working mothers. Our goal is not to lecture, but to empower women who want to combine gratifying careers with a rich family life. And we want to start a conversation to get men and women talking, not just at home, but in the workplace. What do you want them to talk about?
Well, it's amazing how different the views are on pretty simple things between men and women. It's almost as if we have sort of a single-sex dialogue on things that you wouldn't think should be that way. If you talk about, why there's so few part-time jobs in America.
Getting to 50-50 is both challenging and hard-hitting, and we're going to see why when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Getting to 50-50 is the title, and the subtitles are very important. How working couples can have it all by sharing it all, and why it's great for your marriage, and your career, and your kids, and you to get to 50-50. Sharon Meers and Joanna Strober are the authors, and Sharon has been good enough to stop by. Roderick Kramer, the professor of organizational behavior at Stanford Graduate School of Business, nice enough to say this. This is the first book I've read that gets it 100% right. As a frantically juggling father and spouse, yay! I learned something valuable and new from every page. The advice is brilliant, the examples cogent and compelling, and the tone wise and humorous. The advice is very interesting. For example, one piece of advice is childcare is not the thing to worry about. Now, that's an amazingly surprising piece of advice. Why do you say that?
Well, we got very lucky and got to interview some of the leading psychologists in the country who had just completed the largest ever study of childcare and child development funded by an arm of the NIH. They looked at 1,300 kids for over 15 years, millions of data points. And what they found was that kids do equally well, whether moms work or not. And what's truly important is what dads do. That we have not really focused properly on the incredibly important role that fathers have to play. Having a second adult involved in a child's life leads to things like higher grades, higher self-esteem, better earnings when kids grow up. Mm-hmm. And really what we should be focusing on is helping make jobs and the situation such that dads can get home for family dinner and be able to do those things.
One of the other pieces of advice you give is enjoy parenting. Put down the BlackBerry, look your child in the eye, and do what interests him or her. That's a marvelous piece of advice. We all want to hang on to the business end, don't we? And there we are.
Well, it's hard, in this economy. We're all trying to keep our jobs, and it's very stressful when your boss is beaming in on your BlackBerry. I mean, what are you supposed to do? But as we heard from lots of working parents, and again, the psychologist we talked to is, when you walk through the door, give the first 20 minutes to your kid, no matter what. Your boss will survive, and your children just need that attention at the end of the day, and things can get off on a wonderful smoother path when you can make that break from the workday, at least to start, and go back to your work when they've gone to bed.
What is the conversation that you want to get started, the conversation you mentioned in the introduction?
So I was just saying, if you talk to men separately from women outside the workforce or outside the workplace about why there's so few part-time jobs, women will say things like, I tried part-time, I went 4 days a week, and I was working 90% and getting paid 80%, and it really wasn't a good deal. And if you talk to guys, they'll say things like, well, women expect to be paid ratably when they work part-time, but there are all these frictional costs, so they shouldn't be paid ratably. Now, I personally don't know which is the right point of view. All I do know is that we need to be talking to each other about it.
That they're both out there, and there has to be some kind of
and there's no sort of safe place to have a good-humored discussion where lawyers and other people don't get anxious about, what is the way to look at that so that we can have those kinds of jobs when they're needed.
You do have a bit of a vision of what it could be like in a 50-50 world. You say, picture a world where the odds are even, where the rewards of career and family life are shared equally by men and women. That's the place we'd like to work, and is what we want to leave our children. And then you go on, according to the numbers, progress has stalled things in the last decade. Not enough women get enough power to accelerate change in the workplace. We think there's a way out of this rut, voicing 3 truths about women, men, and work that will empower many more people to get to 50-50. Am I at the heart of the book here? I think I am.
You absolutely are.
Okay, let's just mention the 3 truths. Truth number 1, women don't quit because they want to. What are you saying there?
Well, there's studies that actually say that over 80% of the women who quit their jobs don't do it because they absolutely want to be home with their kids. They do it because they really don't feel they have a choice, that either the small amounts of flexibility they need aren't granted to them by employers who see it as a risky thing, or they have husbands who can't see how to give them the kind of 50-50 help at home that would make it possible for them to keep their jobs.
I want to skip the second truth for the moment and go on to number 3. It's not a fair game, but you can even the odds. Not much time to answer that one, but what would you say quickly about that one?
Well, you hear a lot of people say women don't like their jobs as much as men do, and that's you got to look at what women go through in the workplace, not because anybody's bad, but just because the world hasn't changed enough yet, and there's lots of interesting research on that.
We need to stop just when it's getting interesting, but there will be more about the truths when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. It is Conversations on the Coast. The title of today's book is Getting to 50-50. One of the 2 authors, Sharon Meers, is with us. Unfortunately, Joanna Strober could not join us. And Kathleen McCartney, who is the dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, says Getting to 50-50 builds on what the latest research tells us, 4 years of getting that down, that children can thrive with 2 working parents and that fathers and mothers play equally important roles. I wish this book had existed when I was raising young daughters. Can't get much more of a compliment than that. One of the problems we have on a radio program like this is time, is we sometimes miss getting something out on the air that's really very, very important. And there's a couple of paragraphs at the end of your book that I think are very, very important, and I wish you would share those paragraphs with our audience now.
Thanks. Dream for a moment. Imagine if everyone you worked with, from top down, fully understood the demands of working parenthood. No one would stay later than they needed to. Workers would get done more in less time because they'd have incentive to do so, and 24/7 would be reserved for times it's really needed, for real surges in work and crises. Managers would know that sending workers home to their families is good business. Reliable childcare might finally be available on a scale that makes it more affordable. Schools would create systems, schedules, and policies aligned with grown-up work hours. A request for flexibility would not be considered a sign of weakness, and dads would ask for it as routinely as moms do. Women would get promoted right alongside with men because they wouldn't be devalued after they embarked on motherhood. They would work until retirement, not drop out years before their time. Free of guilt, full of satisfaction. Families would have the security of 2 breadwinners. Children would have the benefit of 2 involved parents. Married partners would be really equals in all things.
You can't ask for anything more than that. I guess that's describing the perfect future. But I mean, you do spend so much time in the book showing that there are just incredible benefits all the way around. Benefits for the children, benefits for the parents, benefits for the businesses that the parents are working in. It's such a win-win-win kind of thing, but it isn't an easy fight. It isn't an easy fight. For example, there's the problem we have with truth number 2. Success does not require 24/7. Now, 24/7 is, out there, particularly in our neck of the woods, the Silicon Valley, and so forth and so on. And at one point in the book, you point out that after researching this thing, you're pretty darn sure this is a machismo thing.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing. We quote some guys we interview saying, XYZ it's a real man's job, and for God's sakes, long hours are not a measure of anyone's gender, and but these things sort of happen. We become I am as bad as anybody until frankly doing the research for this book, I had no idea that there are leading experts in organizational behavior at big business schools like Harvard Business School who have, again, for years been showing that 24/7 behaviors actually undermine profitability, that people make terrible mistakes, that they become, in effect, all hours gladiators who, will make errors and then, be up all night trying to fix them and make the rest of the team have to stay late to deal with these things. And that, in fact, we can take control of our workday by doing things like really measuring what matters for success and having good metric systems and having things like quiet time at work where people can't interrupt each other, because it's like 25% loss of time every time somebody walks into your office and says, "Hey, Joe," or "Hey, Jane."
Or calls yet another meeting.
Absolutely.
At a time that's inconvenient to parents.
Yeah. One of the things I like to say is Henry Ford would be deeply disturbed by the white-collar worker. We are a very inefficient bunch.
One of the theories you have, one of the things you theorize about is if we could vote, on it, the 24/7ites would lose big.
Absolutely. Because
nobody's happy really doing it that way. They're just doing it to get along, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think it's become such an emblem of, we've confused commitment with the 24/7 ethic. And, what we really loved was finding incredibly successful people now in their 70s who've run big hospitals and are experts in their field, presidents of universities and CEOs who said, you know what? Even Jim Ellis, the guy who wrote Good to Great, said that the guys who ran the companies that performed best in American business history were guys who went home and did not come in on the weekend. And those are the role models we should be looking for.
These are the guys that you give a nice new name to, at least new to me. They are the dual-centrics.
The dual-centrics.
May the dual-centrics and their followers take over the business world and let everybody go out and buy at least one, if not two copies of 50/50. It's by Sharon Meers and Joanna Strober. This has been Conversations on the Coast. And I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.